Hi folks, you're listening to the third episode of my Fantasy Premier League podcast. I'm recording on Friday night, the 26th of January, so we're in between game weeks 24 and 25. We've got an FA Cup weekend this weekend, so as I say, I'm recording on Friday night after a nice calm Friday. Usually Fridays are a bit crazy for me, especially on Twitter with the deadline on Saturday mornings. I get a lot of people coming asking me questions, so I've enjoyed today, nice relaxed day, and sat down and watched Sanchez make his debut for United this evening. So just going to check in now with a half an hour podcast before looking ahead to game week 25. So the first thing I'll say is when I listened back to last week's podcast, I realised how depressed I sounded. That was mainly down to Hazard and Christensen. So I'm going to try and sound a bit more upbeat this week. Now that Hazard's banished from my team, even though he trolled me again, I'll try sound a bit more upbeat this week. I'm gonna start off this week. I'm gonna give a bit of a background to who I am, because I realise there's probably people stumbling upon this podcast who don't follow me on social media. So just a quick background. So I've been playing FPL. This is my 10th season. Started off playing it at 17 or 18 years old, and didn't take it as serious at first, and quickly became an addiction, like it does for many of us. So I've been very successful in the last 4 or 5 seasons. So in the last 4 seasons, I finished in the top 1% in the world rankings. The best finishes were in 2014-15. I finished 352nd overall. Then in 15-16, in Leicester's title winning season, I finished 102nd overall. Had a pretty frustrating campaign last season. I finished 41k, which obviously is still a very good rank, but I always aim for top 10k now that I've had those 2 top 400 finishes. So my target going into this season is to finish in the top 10,000, and I'm currently just inside. I'm around 9k at the minute, so I'm on course to reach my goal. So I've got to keep reminding myself of that when I have frustrating game weeks, that just keep the eye on the top 10k, and everything else will take care of itself. So that's a quick introduction. If you don't follow me on social media, you can get me on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at FPL General. Spend most of my time on Twitter, so that's the best place to come if you have any questions about fantasy. What I'm gonna do in this pod, first of all, I'll quickly look back at game week 24 very quickly, because it wasn't a very good game week for me. I'll go on then and I'll update my FPL Watchlist. I'll look at possible transfers for game week 25. I haven't made any yet, so I'll talk about what I'm thinking about. There's a lot of talk this week about Kane and Aguero. A lot of people have to decide one or the other. It's pretty hard to fit both in because they're so expensive. So I'll talk a little bit about them later as well, and give my thoughts on those two. Something I'm going to add into the podcast as well, which I should have done in the first 2, was talk about captaincy options as well. So I'll talk about the captaincy options for game week 25, and I'm pretty set on my captain. So I'll talk about that as well towards the end. And then I'll just finish off. I've got a couple of questions from Twitter. I'll just answer 1 or 2 of them, and I'll wrap things up. So as I said before, I want to try and keep these pods to around a half an hour, so just to keep it to the point and avoid rambling on too much. So looking back to game week 24, as I say, it's been a frustrating couple of weeks for me. I went in game week 22, I was sitting pretty at 3.5k overall. In 2 weeks I've dropped to just inside 10,000, so I'm at 9,700 overall. So I mean, it's a very good rank for this stage of the season, but it has been a frustrating couple of weeks, as people who follow me will know, especially with Hazard and Christensen. I mean, Christensen playing 57 minutes 2 weeks in a row. I mean, you couldn't make it up. So I mean, Chelsea are getting the clean sheets, but I'm not getting the points for Christensen, which is very frustrating. But I'll more than likely be holding on to him with Chelsea's good fixtures, and hopefully he can keep his place, because he has been superb this season for Chelsea. So I would expect him to keep his place in the back four or back five, whatever you want to call it. So I took, in game week 24, I took my second points hit of the season. So it was a bit of surgery, getting rid of Hazard, getting rid of Calvert-Lewin, and getting rid of, who was the third one, Richarlison. So brought in De Bruyne, Arnautovic, and Callum Wilson. So it didn't really work out very well. Well, it didn't work out at all, because Hazard obviously banged, much to my frustration. But long term, I'm happy enough to hold on to De Bruyne, and Wilson's got Chelsea this in midweek, but after that he's got quite a good run of fixtures. So I'm backing him. I'm going to probably hold on to him for 4 or 5 weeks and see how he goes. So I've moved back to 3-4-3 formation now. So I'm not expecting anything from Wilson against Chelsea, but then in the 3 games after that, I'll be hoping for returns from him then. Obviously, the Arnautovic injury is very frustrating, so he's one I'm probably going to have to move on now. So game week 24 was 49 points minus 4, so 45, and it was a red arrow. So I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Captain Kane scored against Southampton, so happy enough with that. Apart from that, I didn't get much really. De Bruyne 6, Alonso 6. Arnautovic and Sterling both got 5, and apart from that it was just 1s and 2s all round. So not going to dwell on game week 24 very long, and just look ahead to game week 25 and hopefully get back on the upward curve with a green arrow. So for anyone who hasn't listened before, I keep an FPL watch list which I update every week after I've watched the highlights and all the games have been completed in the game week. So I go through each team individually and add players to my watch list and remove. So I'm not going to spend too much time doing it every week on the podcast. I'll just mention the players that I've added this week and the players that I've removed. So what I do first is I'll talk about the players that I've added to the watch list. So I've got about 5 who I've added and 5 who I've removed roughly. So the first player, as soon as Theo Walcott moved to Everton, he went straight on the watch list. I didn't expect him to go straight into the Everton team last week, but he did, and he got an assist. So Theo's someone he's going to come into consideration this week when I look to get rid of Arnautovic. So 7.1 million. He's got a point to prove now. He wants to get in he's obviously going to want to get in the World Cup squad for the summer. So he's going to want to have a big second half of the season, and Allardyce has been talking him up already, saying he needs pace in the side, and I think Walcott is going to be a really good option going forward. I don't know if I'll get him this week, but he's definitely one I'm keeping a close eye on. So since my last pod, we've had some big transfers. We've had Sanchez going to United and Mkhitaryan going the other way to Arsenal. So that brings both of those onto our radars now in fantasy. Again, I've added both of them to the watch list after their moves, but I'm unlikely to move for them this week. I'm going to hold off and see how both of them fit in. I watched United this evening in the FA Cup. Sanchez played. He played pretty well. I think he probably got 2 assists. He got kicked up and down the pitch, which didn't help things by the Yeovil lads. So he's probably lacking a bit of fitness from what I could see. 11.7 million. It's big money to pay out, and United have got Spurs this weekend, so I'm not too worried about bringing him in yet. It's the game week 26 fixture against Huddersfield at home is the one you'd want to probably be looking at bringing him in if you're going to bring him in. So I'm not gonna get him this week, but I'm gonna see how he goes against Spurs, and then reevaluate things with Sanchez. Mkhitaryan, he's much cheaper. 7.6 million, and it's not that long ago, back in August September time, when he started the season on fire with 5 or 6 assists and a goal in his first 5 games or something like that. So obviously things didn't work out under Mourinho, but he's a player I think who could be a really good option in the second half of the season for Arsenal. I mean, he's not going to have to do much defensive duties in the Arsenal team. He's just going to be let roam free and do his attack and what he's good at. I mean, we look back to his time at Dortmund, he had superb figures for goals and assists. So I would expect him, especially now that he's got some experience in England and in the Premier League, so he's bound to have adjusted by now. And Mourinho's even been saying things like that since he sold him, that he expects Mkhitaryan to be even better now than he was at United, because he's had that time to settle in. So definitely one to keep an eye on at 7.6 million, especially if Arsenal go through and sign his old teammate Aubameyang from Dortmund. I mean, if those two are playing together up front for Arsenal, they could be a really dangerous pairing, and we could see a lot of goals from those two. So that's 3. So Walcott, Sanchez and Mkhitaryan, 3 new additions to the watch list. Another couple of players I've added is from Stoke. So Paul Lambert's come in, and straight away they got a 2-0 win against Huddersfield. Now I wouldn't read too much into that, because Huddersfield have been pretty poor in the last couple of weeks, but it's a win all the same, and it's a clean sheet, so maybe they can get some momentum going now under the new manager. So Shaqiri impressed me the most watching the highlights. He was playing pretty advanced, and you know, he had plenty of chances. 6 million. He's already produced the goods earlier in the season. My big worry with him is it always feels like he's a sneeze away from getting injured again. So that always kind of put me off Shaqiri in the past, but I think I'm going to have to ignore that and really consider him this week, because I mean, for those like me who have Arnautovic, it's a very easy move to Shaqiri. So you're saving about $1 million with that move as well. And Stoke have got good fixtures, so they've got Watford, Bournemouth, Brighton and Leicester in the next 4. So as I say, if they can get a bit of momentum going under Paul Lambert, the likes of Shaqiri could be a really good option. I've added Choupo-Moting as well. I owned him earlier in the season when he was playing out of position up front. Now, he didn't play out of position in game week 24 because Diouf played up front and he scored as well, so he's another one. I'm not really a big fan of Diouf, but he is one to consider. But I much prefer the likes of Shaqiri and Choupo-Moting. Choupo is 5.4, so if you're considering a Stoke player, and if you're like me, if you're a bit wary of Shaqiri and his injury record and things like that, Choupo-Moting might be the way to go, because he saves even more money. So if you're going Arnautovic to Choupo, you're saving the guts of $1.5 million, which you can use to improve things elsewhere. The third Stoke player I've added to the watch list is the new right back, Moritz Bauer, 4.5 million. He seems to be a very attack-minded defender. So in the short clips I've seen of him in his first 2 Stoke games, he's been getting forward with every opportunity. So there's probably assist potential there. I mean, Stoke got a clean sheet against Huddersfield, but I'd have my doubts as to how many clean sheets they'll keep, even with a decent run of fixtures. They've been pretty poor defensively this season, but if they can shore things up at the back, Bauer is the one I'd be looking at 4.5. Another player I've added is Milivojevic from Crystal Palace, 4.7 million. 5 goals this season, and I mean, he's cheap. As a 5th midfielder, he's a great option because he's on penalties, and he's been scoring from open play as well, so it's not just penalties where he's getting his goals from. So I've got Loftus-Cheek, who I need to ship soon. Probably not going to ship him this week, but when I do, I'm looking at his teammate Milivojevic as just a direct replacement for him. So not someone I would play every week. It would be someone who I would use as a first sub. And if you've got someone who doesn't play, you've got someone coming off the bench who's on penalties. So there's always a chance, especially with the likes of Zaha and now Sakho in the Palace team, who are very direct to getting in the box. There's always a chance of them winning penalties. So Milivojevic, I think, is a really good option at 4.7 as a 5th midfielder. The last player I've added to the watch list, now this was a painful one to add because I've just sold him, but as much as I hate the guy, I can't ignore his performance against Brighton. So it's obviously Eden Hazard. As I say, as much pain as he's caused me this season, I can't say I'm never going to get him back, because he's just a superb player. And watching him against Brighton, obviously hindsight's a great thing, but watching him against Brighton, I just thought, you know, I wish I kept him, obviously, but I'm not going to dwell on decisions like that now. He's gone, and I'm probably not going to get him back in immediately. But as I say, I've added him back to the watch list, and I may have to bite the bullet at some point in the future and get him back in, you know, tail between my legs, all that kind of thing. But it's important in fantasy. I've learned over the seasons you can't be stubborn. As Hazard's an example. I mean, if his form picks up again, I'm going to have to consider him. I remember I was very stubborn a couple of seasons ago. In the season I did very well, when I finished 102 overall. I was very stubborn with Vardy that season. I'm pretty sure it was the same season that Igalo was firing on all cylinders as well. I was very stubborn with those two. I just didn't see their goals continuing, and I held off on them. I don't think I got Igalo at all, and I got Vardy very late on when I should have got him earlier. Ozil's another player who was, I think it was probably that season as well, he was doing very well, and I was very stubborn because I'm not really a fan of Ozil in fantasy terms, and when players are performing, even if you don't like them for whatever reason, you can't be stubborn. You have to just get in and get on them and just get the points, you know. So as I say, Hazard's back on the watch list. I don't like looking at his name, but he's there, and I'll monitor him over the next game or two. So that's the positive side of things for the watch list this week. That's the players I've added. The players I've removed from the watch list: Luke Shaw didn't play. Ashley Young came back in at left back, so no interest in Shaw anymore because he's a rotation risk. Lanzini is injured, so he's gone from the watch list as well. Heung-min Son played 69 minutes. Spurs have tough fixtures now. They've got United, Liverpool and Arsenal, so I'm not really interested in bringing in Son with the tough fixtures and the fact that he was substituted early. So he's gone from my watch list for the time being as well. Oxlade-Chamberlain is another one. 67 minutes he played against Swansea. He didn't do, I mean, Liverpool obviously lost 1-0 in that game, and the Ox didn't do much to impress me. So again, I don't like players who are going to be taken off early. We don't know how much game time Ox is going to get, so he is cheap, but I've already got Salah and Firmino, so I have no interest in trebling up on Liverpool at the moment. So he's gone. Another player, the last player I've removed, is Jordan Ibe. Because I've got Callum Wilson now, I'm not going to be looking to get Ibe in. I don't really want two Bournemouth players. Ibe only played 61 minutes as well last week, so I mean his stats have been good. He's got his first goal this season, but I mentioned on last week's pod, I don't really know how much. I don't have much faith in Ibe to deliver week in week out as a midfielder who I start. So that's why I went for Wilson. I have much more faith in him to get the goal. So I'm no longer interested in Jordan Ibe. So that's the watch list covered for looking ahead to game week 25. What I'll do now is possible transfers. So what I'm looking at, I obviously haven't made any moves yet. I want to wait to get the FA Cup games out of the way. We had Carabao Cup games as well midweek, so there's no point making early transfers when players can get injured, players can get suspended. So just patience. I'm always preaching patience, so you can never be too patient in FPL. Just wait till FA Cup games are over before you make your moves. There's absolutely no panic. Don't be worrying about losing 0.1, 0.2 million on players. It's much better to be able to bring in your players and you know they're going to play. So I've got one free transfer. What I'm probably looking at is I've got a lot of issues that I want to address soon. So I've got obviously Arnautovic and Loftus-Cheek, both injured, both need to go. So I'm looking at moving one of them on with my free transfer, most likely Arnautovic. So what I'm looking at is probably Arnautovic to either Shaqiri or Choupo-Moting. I'll need to weigh up those two and whether I want to go with who I feel is the better option, who is Shaqiri, or do I want to save an extra few bob and go for Choupo-Moting, who I think has potential as well, and probably less likely to pick up an injury. Because knowing my luck, I'll get Shaqiri in and then he'll pick up an injury. So I'll weigh up that one over the weekend. Another option to replace Arnautovic is Theo Walcott. So it's going to be one of those three more than likely for my transfer. Shaqiri, Choupo-Moting or Theo coming in for Arnie. So I haven't given it much thought yet, as I say, because things can change over the weekend. If one of my other players picks up an injury in the FA Cup, my plans are going to change. So there's no point reading into stats too much until the FA Cup games are over, and then I'll make my decision probably around Monday time, when everything's cleared up. I'm kind of thinking long term as well. I haven't had a United defender or goalkeeper at all this season, so it's something I've wanted for weeks now. They've just been so good defensively, 14 clean sheets, and I want to get in on that defence as soon as I can. Now, I'm not worried about it this weekend because they're playing Spurs, so I don't really expect them to keep a clean sheet there, although knowing Mourinho, he'll park the bus and they will get a clean sheet. So I'm looking in probably game week 26 at bringing in a United defender more than likely. So more than likely Phil Jones, because he's a bonus point magnet, and when he plays, United keep clean sheets more often than not. So I'm probably going to factor that into my game week 25 transfer. So I want to leave some cash aside to be able to go for Jones if I want to. So it'll be Jones will probably replace John Joe Kenny in game week 26. So that's, you can't make plans like that now because so much can change, but that's my initial thoughts. Kenny out for Jones in game week 26. So Kenny, obviously, Everton aren't playing very well defensively, even though Allardyce is a very defensively minded coach. They just don't really have good defenders at the moment from what I can see. Kenny hasn't been great. I don't have much faith in Holgate or Williams either, and Baines has been injured. So the guy Martina, I think, has been playing left back, which is really out of position for him, because I think he's a right-footed defender, so he's more suited to right back. A lot of people obviously brought in Pickford last week. I was close to doing it as well, but I didn't really see the need to do it yet because I'm hoping to get a few more games out of Pope. Pope's got Newcastle, I think, this weekend, so I'd be hopeful of him getting a clean sheet there. And I don't really see Heaton coming back yet, so I'm not going to make that move until I know when Heaton's coming back. So I'm just going to hold on to Pope until I need to move him on. As I say, I'm no interest in Everton the way they're defending. So Kenny's going to go, and obviously Seamus Coleman played for the under-23s in midweek, so he can't be far away from getting back, and they need him back. So that's why Kenny's on the way out of my team very soon. So again, transfers is probably just going to be Arnautovic out for one of Shaqiri, Chupo or Theo, and then looking ahead, hopefully get in Jones in game week 26. So I'll give more information about my transfers probably on Monday on Twitter, so keep an eye there for what I'm thinking. Moving on from my possible transfers, there's been a lot of talk this week about Kane and Aguero. So it's hashtag Kane exit for the second time this season. Now, obviously, when people got rid of Kane during the festive period, he delivered big with 2 hat-tricks. Now it's very hard to see him do that with the fixtures coming up for Spurs. So they've got United, Liverpool and Arsenal in the next 3. So there's been a lot of comparisons done this week between Kane and Aguero. Obviously Aguero did the damage in game week 24. It hurt me not owning him last week. I think he got 17 points with his hat-trick. So obviously a big haul, something we can't ignore. So obviously a lot of managers are moving towards bringing Aguero in now as well, because fixtures are better than Kane's. He's got West Brom at home, and then he's got Burnley and Leicester. So obviously big potential there for big points from Aguero. Jesus is still injured, so we don't really know when he's going to come back. So Aguero looks pretty safe. We can never say with Pep that he's safe, because Pep could easily play a false striker, the likes of Sterling. So you would think Aguero will start the next 3, but I would be wary. I wouldn't be surprised if he sits out in one of those games, especially with Champions League coming up now as well. It'll be interesting to see if Aguero plays FA Cup, which I don't expect him to, but if he does, it's gonna be a bit worrying for those who are bringing him in or who have him, because that's a lot of games he's played, because he's played Carabao Cup as well. So if he plays FA Cup, surely he'll get a rest at some point before the Champions League. So I've had Harry Kane since game week 1, and I'm more than likely going to have him right through until game week 38. I just think he's that good, and I don't even look at the fixtures too much with Harry Kane, because I think he can score braces, he can score hat-tricks against anyone. 21 goals in 23 league games this season. I mean, that says it all. There's been so many games where he hasn't scored, but when he bangs, he tends to get big hauls, braces or hat-tricks. So he's always a captaincy option every week. For me, when it comes to Kane against Aguero, obviously the ideal scenario would be to have both, but I'm not in a position to do that, and I know a lot of people won't be, because we've got big hitters in midfield. So without doing a lot of surgery, it's very hard to get both. So that's why people are having to decide one or the other this week. For me, because I've got other issues to deal with, I've got Kenny I want to get rid of, I've got Arnautovic, I've got Loftus-Cheek, and Pope's going to have to go soon as well. So that's kind of making up my mind for me. I don't really have transfers to go for Aguero. So first of all, I'm not getting rid of Kane, so that's one option out the window. So if I wanted to get Aguero, I would have to do a bit of surgery, probably getting rid of Firmino, who I don't want to, because I'm quite happy with Firmino. I mean, he hit the post against Swansea at the end. It could have been very different FPL wise if that went in for him. So, and Liverpool have got Huddersfield this weekend, so I would expect something from Firmino there. So I'm not really too worried about not owning Aguero. I mean, I've got De Bruyne and Sterling as well from City, so I'm hoping that they can chip in. I mean, even if it is Aguero scoring the goals, hopefully it can be Sterling and De Bruyne providing them for him. So I'm going to be going without Aguero. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, because I mean, he's a superb captaincy option against West Brom this weekend. Last week, if I owned him, I would have captained him. This week, if I owned him, I'd captain him for West Brom, but I don't. So if you have him, he could be really, really good this weekend. So that's my take on those two. As I say, I'm confident in Kane, even with the fixtures. Probably not expecting much from him against United this weekend. If you can get a goal, great. Liverpool then, I mean, Liverpool, they have been keeping clean sheets this season, but they are shaky, so I would expect Kane to get something there. And we know his record against Arsenal. I think he's got 6-6 against Arsenal, so he loves the London derby, so I wouldn't be worried about that one either. Another factor in me not bringing in Aguero for this week is, this brings me into captains now, so I'll talk about the captaincy option. So I'm nailed on to captain Salah this week against Huddersfield. So he blanked against Swansea, but I don't expect him to blank back to back. I don't know, he very rarely does that. So Huddersfield have been, just from what I've seen of them, they've been very, very poor recently. So I would expect big things from Salah in game week 20, in game week 25. I've only captained Salah once this season, and that was when he missed his penalty. He got an assist in that game, so I think he ended up with 4 points or something. So it was frustrating when I captained him, but obviously probably should have been captaining him more often this season. He's been that good, but 100% Salah is going to be my captain for game week 25. So again, that's another factor for not getting Aguero, because I wouldn't captain Aguero if I brought him in, so that kind of makes it easier not to get him. So Salah's going to be my captain. As I said, if I had Aguero, he probably would be my captain. So those two are probably the two standout captaincy options for game week 25. I wouldn't really like to have to make the decision between the two. So in that sense, I'm happy that I've just got one of them. I know I'm going to throw another two names into the captaincy mix as well. Again, I don't like mentioning his name because it hurts every time I say it. Hazard. He was superb against Brighton. Brighton were very, very poor defensively, but Hazard, obviously, he still has to go and put the ball in the net, and he did it twice. So Bournemouth are not known for their defensive stability, so Hazard at home to Bournemouth this weekend could be a good shout for captaincy there as well. And obviously I don't own him, so he's guaranteed to get at least one. The other one I'll throw in for captaincy is Harry Kane. Just because he's a captaincy option every week, because he's so good. Again, he's playing United though, so United have been so good defensively. I wouldn't be expecting much from Kane, and I think the likes of Salah, Aguero and Hazard are probably better options than Kane this week for captaincy, but don't rule him out. I mean, if you've got a gut feeling that Kane's going to do well against United, I wouldn't have any hesitancy to stick the armband on him. So that's captains covered as well. Something else I should mention is obviously during the week we had the Carabao Cup, so that had a knock-on effect. So we thought we were going to have a blank game week in game week 28. It now looks very unlikely because of Arsenal winning, and so Man City. The only way we can get a blank game week in 28 now is if Man City have to play a 5th round replay in the FA Cup. So it's quite unlikely. So we're probably going to have a full schedule of fixtures in game week 28. So probably just makes things a bit easier planning wise for the blanks and doubles. But the guy you need to follow on Twitter for all the fixtures for all the blanks and double game weeks is Ben Crellin. So you find him on Twitter at Ben Crellin. He will keep you on top of all things blanks and double game weeks. He's a superb source of information for us managers, and he's a must follow. He's right up there. I always call him the two Bens. The two Bens are the two must follows on Twitter. Ben Crellin for the fixtures and Ben Dinnery for the injury news. So if you're not following those two by now, you should be. One or two questions before I wrap things up from Twitter. Apologies in advance for name pronunciation. So Intihab Ahmed asked me about Hazard. He said, will I get him back? So I've probably covered that earlier. Yes, he's been a nightmare, but I've added him back to the watch list, so I can't rule out getting him back. I'm not going to get him back this week, but for those who don't have him and you don't have any other pressing issues in your team this week, Hazard at home to Bournemouth, it could be a good time to get him in. Now take that with a pinch of salt coming from me, because obviously I've cursed Hazard this season. So definitely, for answering the question, will I get him back in? I may get him back in, but it won't be this week. Another question, I had two questions about Southampton. One from Darkley T and another from Gunnar FPL. So they were just asking me about Southampton assets. Now I presume it's because they've got good fixtures coming up, and I watched Southampton Spurs last Sunday, and Southampton were better than I've seen of them in recent weeks. So obviously people are having a glance at their players now, but there's no one there that really interests me. McCarthy has been playing in goal ahead of Forster. Now, I'd be wary of getting him in because Forster's a good goalkeeper and he could get his place back at any time. So you could end up getting McCarthy in and then Forster wins his place back. So that's a risky one in my opinion. The defender Stevens, he was decent from what I've seen in Match of the Day as well. He had a good chance from a corner, inches wide, so he's got goals in him. But the worry with him is there's a lot of competition at centre back for Southampton. So you've got him, you've got Yoshida, and you've got the guy Hoyt, or Wesley Hoyt, however you say his name. So I'd probably avoid him as well. Ward-Prowse, people are talking about Ward-Prowse because he scored a brace. I think it was game week 23 he scored a brace, but he's a player that's never nailed down a starting place for Southampton. He's never been very consistent with fantasy returns either, so I wouldn't bother with him either. They have bought a new striker, Carrillo, 6.5 million. I don't know much about him. Probably one to keep an eye on over the coming weeks. Don't go buying him straight away. Let's see him in action first. That's Saints. Back to the question, am I interested in any? I'll give it another week or two to see if things can improve with their fixtures. Last question from Andy Lakeman. He asked me about my strategy for the rest of the season regarding second wildcard and chips. So it's not really something I've thought about too much yet. As I say, we need to follow Ben Crellin for the fixtures, and once we get more information about the blank game weeks and the double game weeks, then I'll start preparing a lot more for them. I've already played my free hit, so I probably need to plan a little bit more carefully than others who still have their free hit. The way I see it from this point of the season onwards, you need to view every transfer as gold, really. You know, every transfer you use from here on in is very valuable. So don't think about the transfer you're using just for one game week. Think about it long term. Is this a good move long term? Is it a worthy transfer? Because I mean, you want to avoid point hits as much as possible. So think long term with your transfers as well as short term, especially now when we've got double game weeks and blank game weeks to think about. So I've got my second wild card. What I'll more than likely do is play it the week before a double game week and then activate bench boost or triple captain in the double game week. So I've always played my triple captain and bench boost in a double game week for obvious reasons, and that's more than likely what I'll do again this season. There's just much more chance of big points hauls doing it that way. But again, I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. Don't rule out using your bench boost in a single game week or your triple captain for that matter. It can pay off. I mean, if you're going into a single game week with a squad of 15 players who all look good on paper, don't rule out using the bench boost in that scenario, because it could end up paying off more than it will in a blank game week or a double game week. Sorry, we often see a lot of rotation in double game weeks. So again, don't rule it out. Same with triple captain. If you've got a strong gut feeling about a triple captain in a single game week, don't rule it out. I mean, I won't be doing it. I'll be keeping it for a double game week when one of my players is playing twice. But I've already seen this season a couple of instances where triple captain has paid off in a single. I know FPL Fly played it on Harry Kane quite early in the season. I think it was against Huddersfield, and I think he came out with about 40 points or something like that from triple captainship. And then you compare that to the folk who played triple captain on Harry Kane in his double game week and got nothing. So it just goes to show you. So keep all options open. Don't be set. Don't be flexible with your strategy. That's probably the best advice I can say. Don't be set in stone, and be prepared to change with the game. So I've gone over half an hour, so I'm going to wrap things up. One or two things to mention before I finish. I did a podcast this week with Asmir Begovic, so it's not available yet, but I will, when it is, I'll post it on Twitter when it's available. So I spoke to Asmir about just fantasy FPL in general. So just mentioned a couple of players for the rest of the season and just how things have been going for me. So keep an eye out on that, and follow Asmir's podcast is called Season of Sports, so you can follow it at Season of Sports on Twitter, and he gets some really good guests on, and he gets quite a lot of fantasy Premier League guests on as well, so it's worth a listen every week. So yeah, if you don't follow me already on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you'll find me at FPL General. Let me know what you thought of the podcast. Anything about my watch list, any players I didn't mention, maybe players you don't agree with that are on my watch list, anything to do with my transfers, captains. Let me know what you're doing, who your captain's going to be, any feedback on the podcast as well, anything. I mean, this is only the third episode, so it's all just a learning curve for me, and things will improve going forward. I'll probably need to look at adding a little bit of music or something into the start. So if anyone wants to help me out with that as well, send me a message and we'll get that organised. What else am I left to say? Yes, I mean, it should be on, you should be able to get it on SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, and third time lucky this week. I'm hoping to get it on iTunes. It's been a little bit more complicated to get it on iTunes, so I'm hoping to get this one on iTunes for those who listen to the podcast there. If you're on YouTube, give it a like, hit subscribe so you don't miss out on any future pods. Leave a comment as well. I mean, I get back to people on all platforms, so leave me a comment anywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Even leave a comment in the SoundCloud box if you're listening there. Leave a comment under the YouTube video, and I'll get back to you at some point. So, as I say, have a good weekend. Don't make any transfers until after the FA Cup games, and I'll talk to you all soon.